Of students to on-site learning is also being brought forward. The state recorded 8 more deaths today and another 587 infections. Victoria's government has introduced a raft of measures to make it easier for people living with disabilities to get vaccinated. The state has recorded 1,638 new infections and 2 more deaths, a woman in her 60s and a woman in her 70s. From tomorrow, Victorians living with a disability can get vaccinated at state hubs without a booking, and 10 dedicated disability pop-up centres will be opened in areas of concern. Prime Minister Scott Morrison says he welcomes the return of the French ambassador amid a diplomatic spat with France. The ambassador was recalled after the Australian government scrapped a $90 billion submarine deal with France in favour of a new arrangement with the US and UK. Mr Morrison has described the period as difficult and says he is yet to talk to the French president. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has urged China to stop incursions into Taiwanese airspace. Beijing has sent dozens of warplanes into the island's defence zone in recent weeks, sparking fears of a military conflict in the region. It comes as US officials say the US and Chinese presidents will hold virtual talks by the end of the year. The New South Wales Premier has outlined changes to the state's reopening roadmap. All students will be back in classrooms by October 25. Kindergarten, Year 1 and Year 12 students will still return on October 18, with all other years 1 week later. From Monday, 10 fully vaccinated people will be allowed to visit a home, while up to 30 will be able to gather outdoors. And indoor swimming pools will also reopen for rehabilitation, lessons and laps. From Monday, up to 100 fully vaccinated people will be permitted to attend weddings and funerals. That's a doubling of the cap announced by former Premier Gladys Berejiklian. Significant changes have also been made to freedoms at 80% double vaccination. 20 people will be allowed to visit a home, while 50 will be able to gather outdoors. Up to 3,000 people will be able to attend outdoor ticketed events. That is a big jump from the previous cap of 500. And at 80%, nightclubs will reopen, but only for seated drinking. Dancing won't be allowed. Rules around mask wearing will also be eased earlier than planned. Once the state reaches 80% vaccination, they will no longer be mandatory in offices for people who have had both jabs. The Premier, Dominic Perrottet, has defended the changes, which he said were made at the last crisis cabinet meeting.
These changes today are measured, sensible, and ensure that we open up in a very safe way. I met yesterday for some time with Dr Chant and with Minister Hazzard. We ran through a whole range of issues. We then took some suggested changes to the roadmap to the cabinet meeting last evening. It was a long meeting, but one in which I think was constructive, productive, and these changes today I think will make a real difference. We want New South Wales to open up as quickly as possible, as safely as possible.
Not everyone is happy with the changes. The president of the New South Wales Teachers Federation, Angelo Gavrilotis, says he's furious the sector wasn't consulted about all school children being back in classrooms by the 25th.
Yesterday afternoon, the Secretary of the New South Wales Department of Education had a meeting with all staff from across New South Wales. And during that meeting, not a single word, not a peep about this revised roadmap. This is the second revision within a week, and it's the third revision over the course of the last number of weeks. We were told that we need certainty, but the only thing we're getting is uncertainty and bucket loads of disrespect. No prior consultation whatsoever, none with the teaching profession with respect to the original roadmap, let alone this revision upon revision. And the challenges that are associated with it, the risks that are associated with it, have clearly not been calculated. Well, the first thing we would have asked was, how do you intend to staff a school with all students present from the 25th of October when only approximately 85% of your workforce has been double vaccinated? when only 85% of the workforce are available to return back onto school site, how will you staff your school? Was that considered at all? If teachers haven't been fully vaccinated yet, it's for a couple of reasons. The first is that the mandate for the double vaccination comes into effect on the 8th of November. But more importantly, despite repeated calls on our part to the government, teachers were never prioritised as part of the vaccination rollout, with the exception of teachers in 3 local government areas. The vaccination rates amongst teachers are the same as the general public. They could be a few points higher, but they joined the queue like all other members of the general public. How will we staff the schools? Secondly, we called for a ventilation audit over 3 months ago. We recognise that vital in a safe return to mitigate risks are vaccinations and ventilation, and that's based on the science that we've learnt and the health advice from other jurisdictions. The ventilation audit didn't commence until a few weeks ago. It's hardly been completed, and there's been next to no mitigation measures taken or strategies undertaken to deal with and remedy the issues, such as windows that don't open in our schools. The third risk relates to the HSC. HSC students were meant to be off-site to commence the HSC prior to the return of all students. We will now have a situation that all students, including HSC students, will be back 2 weeks earlier, exposing schools at large, HSC students as well, at risk, because as regrettable as it is, it's inevitable there will be cases, and when there is a case, that impacts hundreds of students and teachers on each occasion who are deemed as close contacts. Were any of these things considered? We wanted to go back to face-to-face learning yesterday, but we can't do so because the health advice doesn't allow it. They want to open up the community, and that's a great thing. That's an important thing. But it's opening up for those who are double vaccinated. What are we going to do with the logistics, the operations of schools, when we only have about 85% of teachers double vaccinated? How will that be managed? We need an answer to that very fundamental question from the Premier and the Minister, because I can tell you this much. Had teachers and the profession and principals been in the room and consulted, that's the very first question we would have asked before we moved on to any other consideration.
Work has begun on a new quarantine centre near Perth to house people returning from overseas. It comes with an announcement that residents in the suburb of Bullsbrook are set to be given better access to clean water following a long fight by locals affected by firefighting chemicals.
So I'm in Bullsbrook, in Perth's very outer northeastern suburbs, and in a paddock just over here, construction began today on a 1,000-bed quarantine centre. It's designed to accommodate people returning from overseas or other people who need to quarantine. The idea is it will feature self-contained accommodation units with access to fresh air and space, alleviating some of the issues presented by hotel quarantine. The first 500 beds are due to be available by March, but some have questioned whether that's too late for it to be useful, as other states look to trial home quarantining. But the Minister for Finance, Senator Simon Birmingham, says that the centre will have other uses in the future, such as accommodating people during natural disasters.
There will be a range of different scenarios that these facilities may provide an important use for into the future, and not just in response to COVID-19, but future health crises that could be faced, or indeed future humanitarian situations such as those that we've seen in Afghanistan in recent months.
Also announced today was that Defence will be partnering with the state government and Water Corp to ensure that the residents of West Bullsbrook have access to town water. That comes after chemical contamination was detected, caused by the use of firefighting chemicals at a nearby Air Force base.
More than 81% of the eligible population across the country has now received one dose of a COVID vaccine, as New South Wales yesterday reached its 70% double-dosed milestone. The Prime Minister says he is confident the country will surpass the vaccination rates outlined in the National Roadmap.
We're in the home stretch and we're moving towards that line, and then we need to keep going beyond it. because I believe Australia can achieve much higher vaccination rates than the 70 and 80% that we've set out in the national plan, and that will only give us greater confidence and enable us to move even more quickly as we open the country up. I want to see Australians all reunited once again. I'm sure we all want that. I have no doubt that all premiers and chief ministers around the country want to see that as well. So we need to keep setting out that path ahead, moving forward with confidence and giving people that hope that the vaccine program is giving them.
The US and China have reached a tentative agreement for President Joe Biden and counterpart Xi Jinping to meet virtually by the end of the year. The in-principle deal was reached after 6 hours of talks between US National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan and China's top diplomat in Switzerland. Tensions between the countries have risen in recent days. The primary goal of the meeting is thought to be improving communication channels. Meanwhile, the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has urged China to stop incursions into Taiwanese airspace. Beijing has sent dozens of warplanes into the island's defence zone in recent weeks, sparking fears of a military conflict in the region. Mr Blinken insists the US relationship with China is rock solid, but raised concerns about tensions with Taiwan unintentionally escalating.
We are very concerned by the PRC's provocative military activity near Taiwan. As we've said, the activity is destabilizing, it risks miscalculation, and it has the potential to undermine regional peace and stability. So we strongly urge Beijing to cease its military, diplomatic, and economic pressure and coercion directed at Taiwan.
For more analysis on the situation in Taiwan, I'm joined now by Professor Caitlin Byrne, Director of the Asia Institute at Griffith University. Good afternoon and welcome to you.
Hi there, Kirsten. Good to be with you.
There has been a tentative agreement for the leaders of China and the US to meet virtually. How significant do you believe this is against the backdrop of what we've seen happen between Taiwan and China in recent weeks?
Look, I think these are positive signs. We have seen, all of these activities happen against the backdrop of strategic rivalry, and the Biden administration has been really strong on its language that, they will be pushing back against China and that there is competition at play, but that they are also interested in finding areas of cooperation. So dialogue is a way forward to finding some of that cooperation. I think it is a positive signal, but we certainly are seeing tensions in the Taiwan Strait.
Will that meeting take on extra significance for Australia, given the recent announcement of the AUKUS Defence Pact with both the US and the UK?
I think Australia is going to be watching that meeting very closely. The US is our strategic partner and ally. China has been our number one trading partner, but we have relations with China at the moment that are at their lowest ebb ever. So that strategic competition has certainly flowed over into our relationship with China. And I think the US's relationship with China is key to how Australia will navigate a pathway forward.
Does that mean that this meeting between the leaders of the US and China could actually help facilitate a renewal in the relationship between China and Australia?
Who knows? We'll have to wait and see. It is a really dynamic environment that we're operating in at the moment. We've seen meetings happen between the administrations previously. Dialogue is an ongoing process, not an end point. So I think those steps towards dialogue are very positive, just like they are, they're positive in a bilateral sense. Opportunities for dialogue in other arenas, including the G20 or COP26 at Glasgow. All of these avenues provide opportunities for dialogue, so they're all important. I don't know that one will necessarily stand out above all others, apart from the fact that we'll be looking really closely to see what happens between the US and China. I think there's a long way to go, so I don't think we should necessarily hold our breath on this particular meeting. It is a process.
OK, let's talk about a different type of dialogue now. What do you make of the visit by former Prime Minister Tony Abbott this week to Taiwan? A visit which has been described as a personal one, but nonetheless involved meetings with the President and key members of the security and foreign affairs establishment.
Kirsten, this has been interesting, hasn't it? You know, to see former Prime Minister Tony Abbott in Taiwan this week, at a time when Taiwan will be celebrating their National Day, speaking at the Yushan Forum, which is really intended to be kind of an important forum within Taiwan itself and as part of their Taiwan-Asia exchange program. So I think it's interesting. He has made it very clear that he's there in a private capacity. He's not representing Australia officially. But you can't help but wonder what are the signals at play. Australia has, over the last year, from the G7 meeting earlier this year to the Australia-US ministerial meetings that happened just recently, made a point of supporting, strengthening ties with Taiwan. Australia is also supportive of Taiwan's case to join the CPTPP, the Regional Economic Pact. So I think there are signals at play, some subtle, some not so subtle, about the way that Australia is supportive of Taiwan's case in building international support on the global stage.
Is there anything about the visit, though, which sets it apart from other interactions which have occurred in the past between Australia and Taiwan?
In some parts, yes, Tony Abbott will be there in person. In other ways, no. Malcolm Turnbull, as former Prime Minister, spoke at this very forum last year and delivered a keynote. He did that virtually, and that's no doubt because of COVID. So we certainly have seen these kinds of engagements before. This in person makes it slightly different, and given that there will be a program of visits surrounding this conference, so former Prime Minister Abbott meeting with significant officials in the administration, in Tsai Ing-wen's administration, does add that layer of significance to it.
OK, Professor Caitlin Byrne, Director of the Asia Institute at Griffith University. Great to speak to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Kirsten. Good to be with you.
US officials have lowered the alert level for an erupting volcano in Hawaii. Activity at Kilauea began last week with a thick layer of molten lava accumulating at the base of the crater over the past few days. Authorities believe further eruptions will remain confined to the summit and not endanger any communities. And a volcano on the Spanish island of La Palma off the West African coast is continuing to erupt. Lava has destroyed nearly 1,000 buildings on the island. Farmers are struggling to keep surviving banana plantations irrigated after flows destroyed roads and water pipes. The eruptions, which began last month, have forced the evacuation of more than 6,000 residents from the area. ABC's Director of News Analysis and Investigations, Gavin Morris, has announced he'll be leaving the national broadcaster. Mr Morris started working at the ABC as a 20-year-old reporter and has spent almost 2 decades at the broadcaster over 3 different stints. He led the launch of the News Channel in 2010 and helped establish the investigations and the specialist reporting team. In a statement, he says, "I will leave confident of the future of ABC News, led by our outstanding news leadership team, our editors and EPs. I'll always be a passionate supporter of the ABC and its vital role in the media and in Australian democracy." Well, a high schooler's love of miniature goats has turned into a booming business, with the animals fetching hundreds of dollars each. The Year 11 student is benefiting from a growing market.
When Charlie Pousty received a unique gift a few years ago, he had no idea where it would lead.
It started off in 2017 when my grandparents bought me a crossbred goat for Christmas.
He was 13 at the time and had always wanted a miniature goat. And once he had one of his own, he decided to invest in a breeding pair.
We got them pregnant the next year, and then, it just kept growing and growing every year. And now, we have a few running around now.
A lot of time and attention is required when caring for his herd of more than 20 goats. And that's in addition to his school responsibilities.
It's pretty hectic, but I manage it all, yes.
The business is really interesting. It has been fueled by his passion. So we have no expertise in goats whatsoever. He is fully self-driven.
Miniature goat popularity is on a steady rise in Australia. It is now estimated there are over 10,000 miniature goats in Australian backyards. And as you can see with this little guy here, they make great pets.
Because people are locked down waiting, looking for pets, and they're looking for Australian miniature babies. A lot of families with younger children are buying the wethers as pets.
Miniature goats sell for around $500 as pets, but breeders are willing to pay Charlie over $2,000 for a prized female goat. His proud mum says all parents should let their children dive into their passions.
What he has achieved and the skills he now has enabled him to set himself up for the big wide world, and he's capable of anything now.
He's hoping there's a big future in miniature goats. Jane McNaughton, ABC News, Corrimungle.
Now to sport with Louise Ransom. Good to see you, Lou. One of the biggest deals in the AFL trade period so far was done today.
Yeah, that's right, Kirsten. So it's to do with Chera, who's one of the big names that we're all looking out for today. So Carlton has secured midfielder Adam Chera from Fremantle in exchange for pick 6 in this year's AFL draft, so a future third-round selection. So Chera has starred for the Dockers, playing 76 games for the club since being selected with pick 5 in the 2017 draft. And the 22-year-old requested a trade from Fremantle so that he could return home to Melbourne. So that has been done. So that's, as we said, the biggest trade so far in this AFL trade period.
OK, now there's some bad news for the Giants' Toby Green.
Yeah, that's right. So Toby Green was due to miss 3 matches. It's now been extended to 6, so he will miss the first 5 matches of season 2022 in the AFL. So, yeah, not good news for the Giants or Green. And this is all to do with the penalty that he had an intentional contact with an umpire that was increased to that 6-game ban at the AFL Appeals Board today. Now, Green was originally given that 3-game suspension by the AFL Tribunal for bumping into umpire Matt Stevick as he disputed a decision against during the Giants in the elimination final against Sydney this year. So the AFL itself appealed the penalty, describing it as manifestly inadequate, and the appeals board found in its favour today. So yeah, 2 big news stories in the AFL today.
Lou, the NRL held a pretty significant meeting today.
Yeah, so this is all to do with the 17th team that's been talked about for so long, it seems now, in terms of expansion in Brisbane in the NRL competition. We know, of course, it's a 1-team town in Brisbane, in the Queensland capital, with the Broncos. You've got the Titans on the Gold Coast, and the North Queensland Cowboys up in Townsville as well. So this has been bubbling away for some time. So the clubs and the club owners met today with the ARLC chairman, Peter V'landys, to talk about this. And the clubs have been reluctant because of, I guess, the financial implications that this might have on the competition. And we've had the pandemic, and there's been so many sporting codes that have lost so much money during this time. The NRL have fared quite well, and also News Corp reported this week that Foxtel has agreed to the new broadcast deal, and that would underpin the funding to do with this 17th team. So that kind of allayed, I guess, the financial fears around this. So we haven't got anything official from the NRL yet, but there are reports this afternoon that that meeting was quite fiery, but in the end, the 17th team will go ahead. That's the reports at this stage. As I said, nothing official just yet, but the Redcliffe Dolphins, based in northern Brisbane, are the favourite to join the competition in 2023. So watch that space. We'll see how that progresses in the next day or two.
OK, I certainly will. Now, Australia's women are continuing their series against India tonight.
Yeah, they are. So this has been such a fun series to watch on because it's been multi-format. So we had ODIs, then we had the one-off test match, which the women's teams don't get to play a lot of test matches, and unfortunately the weather just didn't play along on the Gold Coast with this. It was a drawn test on the Gold Coast. So these 3 T20s get underway tonight, the first one on the Gold Coast tonight. So Australia leads the series by 2 points with those 3 T20s to play. So they'll be looking to get off to a really good start tonight and kind of quash the hopes of India, who need to do really well in this T20 series to have any hope of winning.
OK, great to speak to you, Lou. Let's check the weather again now. Here's Lara.
The cloud band that had been over South Australia has moved east, and now we'll see it stretching from the Territory, Queensland and also into the north of New South Wales. There's also some middle-level cloud over Tasmania. That's formed over the west. This is going to be traversing the state, so this is going to continue into the weekend. There will also be some patchy cloud over the north of the Territory. Also cloudy conditions in the south of Western Australia. The rest of the country will remain clear. Now, we do have a lot of trough activity through the eastern interior. So this will be drawing a lot of warm air into Queensland. Also, that will go into central parts of New South Wales. We will see some very high temperatures throughout the inland parts, but also possible showers over the Tiwi Islands. But further south, the onset of southerly winds will bring a cooler change. So we will have a cold front moving eastwards over the next 24 hours. This will be ahead of a system that will be bringing some gusty showers that will be into the east of Victoria and Tasmania, and with that we will see some cooler temperatures. Looking to the capital cities, cloudy conditions for Brisbane and Sydney. Likewise for Canberra, we could see some possible showers for Hobart, cloudy for Adelaide, wet for Perth and a cloudy day for Darwin. Now that high pressure system over Queensland is driving a lot of the warm wind through the interior and the Territory, so those temperatures will continue. They will be quite high. The rainfall over Tasmania will continue too. We will see some showers over the southwest and also the Kimberley region. Showers for the west of South Australia, and we could see some frost patches. Dry and mostly sunny throughout New South Wales. Cloudy conditions for parts of Victoria and some possible falls along the Queensland coast. Looking to the capital cities, cloudy again for Brisbane and further south. Wet conditions for Melbourne and Hobart. We could see some showers in Adelaide. Cloudy conditions for Perth and a cloudy day for Darwin with a top of 34.
Remember, you can keep up to date at news.abc.net.au and on ABC iView. I'll have more on our top stories next. Do stay with us here on the ABC News Channel.